They say you never really know someone until you see them at their worst. I thought I knew Marcus Chan inside and out. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5. He was my college sweetheart, my best friend. The man who brought me coffee in bed every Sunday morning and knew exactly how I liked it, 2 sugars. A splash of oat milk, stirred counterclockwise because I'd once joked it tasted better that way. And he never forgot, but I was wrong. I didn't know him at all. My name is Sarah Mitchell. And this is the story of how I discovered my husband's infidelity, stayed silent for 3 years, and orchestrated the most calculated exposure of his double life that he never saw coming. It started on a Tuesday in March, 3 years ago. I remember because Tuesdays were always my late days at the architectural firm where I worked as a senior designer. I usually didn't get home until after 8, but that particular evening I'd wrapped up early. A client meeting had been canceled, and I decided to surprise Marcus with his favorite, Thai takeout from the place across town. I pulled into our driveway at 6:15. Arms full of paper bags that smelled like basil and lemongrass. The house looked normal, our modest but beautiful craftsman-style home in the suburbs, with the garden I'd spent years cultivating and the blue door Marcus had painted the previous summer. Everything looked exactly as it should, but when I walked through that blue door, my life shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The living room was empty, but I heard music playing upstairs. Not unusual, Marcus often worked from home and liked background noise. But then I heard the laughter. A woman's laughter, light and intimate, followed by my husband's voice saying something I couldn't make out. His tone playful and warmed out. My hands went numb. The bags of Thai food slipped from my fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a muffled thud. Pad Thai and green curry splattered across the entryway, but I barely noticed. My feet carried me up the stairs on autopilot, each step feeling like I was walking through water, slow and surreal. Our bedroom door was slightly ajar. Through the gap I could see the Marcus and a woman I'd never seen before, both fully clothed but sitting intimately close on our bed, our wedding photo visible on the nightstand behind them. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made my stomach turn, with long dark hair and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. He was showing her something on his laptop, and her hand rested on his thigh with a familiarity that told me everything I needed to know. I should have burst in. I should have screamed, thrown things, demanded explanations. That's what the old Sarah would have done, the Sarah, who believed in fairness and confrontation and working things out, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he looked at her with an expression I hadn't seen him direct at me in years. Maybe it was the text message notification that flashed on my phone at that exact moment, from my mother asking if Marcus and I were still coming to her birthday dinner that weekend. Maybe it was the sheer absurdity of standing in my own hallway, watching my husband with another woman in our bed, while green curry slowly seeped into the floorboards downstairs. Whatever it was, I made a choice in that moment that would define the next 3 years of my life. I slowly backed away from the door, crept down the stairs, cleaned up the spilled food in a daze, and left the house as silently as I'd entered. I sat in my car for 2 hours in a grocery store parking lot, my mind racing. I kept replaying moments from our marriage, looking for signs I'd missed. The late nights he claimed were work deadlines. The new cologne he'd started wearing. The way he'd grown distant during conversations, always distracted by his phone. The business trips that seemed to multiply over the past year. How could I have been so blind? By the time I drove home that night, making sure to arrive at my usual time, I'd made my decision. I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. Because I realized something crucial sitting in that parking lot. Marcus thought he was getting away with it. He thought I was the naive, trusting wife who would never suspect him. And his arrogance, his absolute certainty that he could fool me, would be his downfall. I would stay silent. I would gather evidence. And when the time was right, I would expose everything in a way he'd never recover from. That first week was the hardest. I had to act normal while my entire world had collapsed. I smiled at Marcus over breakfast. I kissed him goodbye when he left for work. I listened to him complain about his demanding boss and office politics, nodding sympathetically while screaming inside. But at night, after he fell asleep, I would lie awake staring at the ceiling. Plotting, I started small. I created a secret folder on my laptop, password protected and hidden in layers of innocuous-looking directories. I began documenting everything: dates, times, unusual behaviors, unexplained absences. I took screenshots of our credit card statements, highlighting charges I didn't recognize. A hotel downtown we'd never stayed at together. Restaurants I'd never been to. Lingerie purchases from stores I didn't shop at, in sizes that weren't mine. The paper trail was extensive once I started looking for it. Marcus had been sloppy, comfortable in his deception. He'd used our joint credit card for everything, probably because he knew I rarely checked the statements. That was his first mistake. I hired a private investigator named Kate Reynolds. I found her through a discreet online search and met her at a coffee shop 3 towns over, where I was certain no one would recognize me. Kate was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and professional with a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "How long do you think it's been going on?" she asked after I explained the situation. "I don't know," I admitted. "Based on what I found, at least a year. Maybe longer." Kate nodded, making notes in a leather-bound notebook. "And what's your end goal here? Divorce? Custody battle? You mentioned you don't have children." "No children, thank God," I said. "And yes, eventually divorce. But more than that, I want everyone to know what he did. His family, our friends, his colleagues. He works in finance, manages wealthy clients who trust him with their investments. His reputation is everything to him. I want that reputation destroyed." Kate raised an eyebrow. "That's a tall order. And potentially risky. Are you sure?" I thought about Marcus's face that night, looking at that woman the way he used to look at me. I thought about all the times he'd made me feel like I was being paranoid or oversensitive when I questioned him about small inconsistencies. I thought about the future I'd imagined for us, the children we planned to have, the life we were supposed to build together. "I'm sure," I said. Kate worked fast. Within 2 weeks, she had confirmed what I already knew. The woman's name was Vanessa Park, a 32-year-old marketing executive at a tech startup. She and Marcus had met at a networking event 18 months ago. They've been seeing each other regularly ever since, usually meeting at a boutique hotel downtown every Thursday afternoon when I was at work, but that wasn't all. As Kate dug deeper, the situation became more complex and so much worse than I'd imagined. Vanessa wasn't the first affair. She was just the current one. Kate uncovered evidence of at least 2 other women Marcus had been involved with during our marriage. One had lasted several months 3 years ago. Another was a brief fling during a business trip to San Francisco. There were probably others, Kate suggested, but these were the ones she could confirm with solid evidence. I felt physically sick when she showed me the report. 8 years together, and he'd been cheating almost the entire time. Our relationship had been alive from nearly the beginning. "There's something else," Kate said, sliding another folder across the table. "About the finances. This is how I learned that Marcus had been siphoning money from our joint accounts. Not huge amounts that would trigger suspicion, but steady withdrawals over the past year that added up to nearly $40,000. He opened a separate bank account in his name only and had been transferring money there regularly. Is he planning to leave?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Hard to say," Kate replied. "But it looks like he's building an exit strategy. Or maybe he's spending it on these affairs. Those hotel rooms aren't cheap, and I found charges for expensive jewelry that I'm guessing you never received." I drove home that day feeling like a stranger in my own life. The man I'd married, the man I'd built a life with, was a complete fraud. Everything had been a performance, and I'd been the only one who didn't know I was in a play. Over the next several months, I became someone I didn't recognize. By day, I was still Sarah, the devoted wife. But in secret, I was a detective, a strategist, someone calculating and methodical in a way I'd never been before. Opened my own bank account at a different institution and began quietly transferring my salary there. I gathered copies of all our important documents, mortgage papers, car titles, insurance policies. I documented every asset we owned together. I met with a divorce attorney named Patricia Hoffman, who came highly recommended for her ruthless efficiency and high-asset divorces. "You're building a strong case," Patricia told me during one of our confidential meetings. "But I have to ask, why wait? Why not file now and be done with it?" I'd been asking myself the same question. Part of me wanted to just end it, to walk away and start over. But every time I came close to pulling the trigger, I thought about Marcus sitting at dinner parties with our friends, charming everyone with his stories, accepting their admiration and respect. I thought about his mother, who constantly praised him for being such a devoted husband. I thought about his colleagues and clients who trusted him. They all deserved to know the truth. Not just the sanitized, behind closed doors version that comes out in a divorce filing. The complete, undeniable truth that he couldn't spin or explain away. I want to time it perfectly, I told Patricia. His firm has its annual partners meeting next spring. It's a huge event, clients, board members, everyone who matters in his professional world. That's when I want this to come out. Patricia looked at me with something like respect. That's almost a year away. You're willing to wait that long? I've already waited this long. I can wait a bit longer. But waiting didn't mean being idle. I spent that year carefully constructing my exit strategy while playing the role of the loving wife. I started secretly recording conversations when Marcus lied to me. I used a small audio recorder I kept in my purse, capturing his elaborate fabrications about where he'd been and what he'd been doing. I wanted him, in his own words, spinning his lies so he couldn't later claim I'd misunderstood or taken things out of context. I befriended Vanessa Park, though she had no idea who I really was. I created a fake social media profile and gradually inserted myself into her online circles. I learned about her life, her patterns, her own relationship with Marcus, which she apparently thought was leading somewhere serious. She had no idea he was married. Marcus had told her we were separated and in the final stages of divorce. That revelation was almost worse than the cheating itself. He'd created an entire alternate reality where I barely existed, through my fake profile. I also discovered Marcus's secret Instagram account, separate from his professional one. He'd posted photos with Vanessa, though he was careful never to tag their exact locations or use his real name. But there were pictures of them together at restaurants, on weekend getaways I thought were solo business trips, looking happy and in love like we'd never been. I downloaded everything. Every photo, every comment, every flirtatious message exchanged. Kate continued her surveillance work, providing me with timestamped photos and videos of Marcus and Vanessa together. Marcus entering her apartment building, the two of them having intimate dinners. A weekend trip to a coastal town where they checked into a bed and breakfast under a fake name. The evidence grew into an irrefutable mountain, but I needed more than just proof of the affair. I needed something that would destroy his professional reputation, not just his personal one. That's when I started looking into his business dealings. Marcus worked at Henderson and Associates, a prestigious wealth management firm. He managed portfolios for high-net-worth clients and had built a reputation as a trustworthy, family-oriented advisor. His clients loved him. His partners respected him. He was on track to make full partner within the next 2 years. I started paying closer attention to his work conversations, the phone calls he took at home, the documents he sometimes left on his home office desk. I didn't understand all the financial jargon, but I took photos of everything and sent them to a forensic accountant. Patricia recommended. That's when we found the irregularities. Marcus had been playing fast and loose with client money. Nothing outright illegal, but definitely unethical, high risk. Investments that generated better commissions for him but weren't in his client's best interests. Churning accounts to generate fees. Recommending products from companies that gave him kickbacks. This won't land him in jail, the forensic accountant explained. But it could cost him his license. At minimum, it would trigger a regulatory investigation. It was perfect. Not only could I expose his personal betrayals, but I could also raise questions about his professional ethics. Let his clients wonder what else he'd been lying about. Let his firm deal with the fallout of having a partner whose judgment and integrity were suddenly in question. The strangest part about those 3 years wasn't the planning or the secret keeping. It was living a double life where I had to be two completely different people at home and in public. I was the Sarah everyone expected. I attended Marcus's work functions, smiling and making small talk with his colleagues. I went to family dinners with his parents, listening to his mother gush about what a wonderful son she'd raised. I met our friends for couples dinners, laughing at Marcus's jokes and playing the role of the happy wife, but alone I was someone else entirely. I was angry, hurt, and calculating in ways that sometimes scared me. I would look at Marcus across the dinner table and wonder how someone could be so duplicitous. How could he kiss me goodnight after spending the afternoon with another woman? How could he tell me he loved me while maintaining an entire secret life? Sometimes I wanted to break. There were moments when keeping silent felt like holding my breath underwater, and I was desperate to surface and scream. Like when his mother gave us a photo album for our anniversary, filled with pictures from our wedding and early years together, talking about what a beautiful love story we had. Or when Marcus surprised me with a weekend trip to the mountains for my birthday, being attentive and romantic in a way he hadn't been in years. And I wondered if he felt guilty or if this was just part of his performance. I even caught myself almost forgetting a few times. We'd be watching a movie together or cooking dinner side by side, and there would be a moment of normalcy that felt real. That's when I'd force myself to remember what I'd seen, what I'd learned. I'd pull out my phone and review the evidence. Kate had gathered photos of him with Vanessa, bank statements showing his secret account, recordings of his lies. The hardest part was maintaining the physical relationship. I couldn't bring myself to sleep with him after discovering the affairs. I started making excuses: work stress, headaches, being tired. Marcus seemed more relieved than disappointed, which told me everything I needed to know about where he was getting his needs met. My friends started noticing something was off. My best friend Jennifer pulled me aside at a coffee date 6 months into my silent investigation. "Sarah, are you okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "You seem different lately, distant." I wanted so badly to tell her everything. Jennifer had been my friend since college, had been my maid of honor at my wedding, but I couldn't risk it. If I told anyone, word might get back to Marcus, and he might start covering his tracks more carefully. "Just work stress," I lied, adding another deception to my growing pile. "We're pitching for a major project and I'm drowning in designs." Jennifer didn't look convinced, but she let it go. I hated lying to her, adding her to the list of relationships that had been damaged by Marcus's actions. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Lisa Chen. I couldn't tell her everything. I kept the details vague, talking about trust issues and marital problems without mentioning the specific circumstances. But she helped me process the anger and pain without breaking down completely. "You're carrying a heavy burden," she observed during one session. "Whatever you're dealing with, keeping it inside is taking a toll." She was right. I'd lost weight from the stress. I wasn't sleeping well. I developed anxiety that manifested in unexpected panic attacks when I was alone. Sometimes I'd be driving and suddenly couldn't breathe, having to pull over until the episode passed, but I couldn't stop now. I'd come too far, gathered too much evidence. The annual partners meeting at Henderson and Associates was only 4 months away. I just had to hold on a little longer. As Marcus's firm's annual meeting approached, I kicked my preparations into high gear. Everything had to be perfect. The timing, the delivery, the undeniable nature of the evidence. I would only get one chance at this, and I couldn't afford any mistakes. I hired a web designer to create a simple but professional website. Nothing fancy, just a clean, modern layout with a timeline of events, photo galleries, and documentation. I registered the domain under a privacy service so it couldn't be traced back to me immediately. The site would stay hidden until I was ready to launch it. I also worked with Kate to compile a comprehensive dossier, physical folder containing copies of everything we'd gathered. Bank statements, private investigator reports, photos, hotel receipts, text message logs, recorded phone conversations. I had multiple copies made, each one identically organized and professionally bound. Patricia, my attorney, had drafted divorce papers that were ready to file. We negotiated with opposing counsel in advance, though Marcus didn't know it yet. I had already contacted one of the city's top divorce lawyers to represent him, explaining the situation and ensuring they'd be prepared when everything went public. I wanted this done quickly and efficiently once I pulled the trigger. The forensic accountant had prepared a detailed report on Marcus's questionable business practices. It was thorough, damning, and written in language that both regulators and lay people could understand. I even prepared a statement for myself, practicing what I'd say if reporters or friends asked for my side of the story. I wanted to be composed, dignified, and unassailable. 3 weeks before the partners' meeting, I made my final move. I contacted Vanessa. I couldn't keep pretending she was just a villain in this story. From everything I'd learned, Marcus had lied to her just as much as he'd lied to me. She thought they had a future together. She thought I was already out of the picture. She deserved to know the truth, even if it would devastate her. I created a new email address and sent her a message with photo attachments. Marcus and me at a recent family dinner, clearly together and happy. Our wedding photo. A shot of our house with both our cars in the driveway, dated just a week earlier. And a simple message: "I'm Marcus Chun's wife. We're still very much married. I thought you should know." I included my phone number in case she wanted to talk. She called 3 hours later. Her voice was shaking. "Is this real?" she asked. "Are you really his wife?" "Yes," I said simply. "I discovered the affair about 3 years ago. I've been gathering evidence since then." There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing, trying to process. 3 years? She finally said, "You've known for 3 years and didn't say anything?" "I had my reasons." "He told me you were divorced," Vanessa said, her voice breaking. "He said the paperwork was almost finalized. He talked about our future together, moving in together once it was official. He said he loved me." Despite everything, I felt sorry for her. She was another victim of Marcus's lies, just like me. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "But you deserve to know the truth. And I need to ask you something. The annual partners meeting at his firm is in 3 weeks. I'm planning to expose everything that night. I wanted to give you the chance to decide whether you want to be part of that or not." "What do you mean?" I explained my plan. The evidence I gathered, the website I created. How I intended to make sure everyone in Marcus's professional and personal life knew exactly what he'd done. "I won't use your name or photos without your permission," I said. "But if you're willing, your testimony about what he told you, the lies he fed you about our marriage, that would make the case even stronger." Vanessa was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was hard with anger. "He made me the other woman," she said. "He let me be complicit in ruining a marriage without even knowing it. Yes, I want everyone to know what he did. To both of us." We met in person the next day. Vanessa was exactly as beautiful as I remembered, but there was a brokenness to her now that made her seem smaller somehow. We sat in a quiet corner of a cafe, two women who should have been enemies but found ourselves allied by a common wound. She showed me messages from Marcus, sweet nothings and promises about their future. Photos he'd sent her from places he claimed were work trips. Key to a storage unit where he'd apparently kept gifts and items he couldn't bring home, a whole separate life hidden away in a 10 by 10 space across town. "I can't believe." "I fell for it," Vanessa said, wiping tears from her eyes. There were signs. Times when he'd suddenly become unavailable or things he said didn't quite add up. But he was so convincing. And I wanted to believe him. "I understand," I said. And I did. I'd been there too. Choosing to trust because the alternative was too painful to consider. Vanessa agreed to provide a written statement and to allow me to use select messages and photos that demonstrated Marcus's deception. She wanted people to know she'd been lied to, that she wasn't a willing participant in destroying a marriage. "When this comes out, my life is going to implode too," she said quietly. "People are going to judge me even though I didn't know." "I know," I said. "And I'm sorry for that. But staying silent means letting him get away with it. With all of it." She nodded, steeling herself. "Then let's make sure everyone knows exactly who Marcus Chun really is." The Henderson and Associates annual partners meeting was held at the Grand Regency Hotel, a gleaming high-rise downtown with a ballroom that cost more to rent for one night than most people made in a month. It was the firm's biggest event of the year, a chance to schmooze with clients, celebrate successful deals, and present awards to top performers. Marcus had been excited about it for weeks. This was supposed to be his year. He was being recognized for bringing in the highest number of new clients and was expected to receive a commendation that would virtually guarantee his promotion to full partner. In the coming year, he bought a new suit for the occasion. He'd been in a good mood all week, whistling while he got ready in the mornings. I watched him prepare for his big night with a sense of detachment, knowing what was coming. "You look beautiful," he said as I emerged from our bedroom wearing a deep blue evening gown. He was already dressed in his new charcoal suit, looking handsome and successful and completely unaware that his world was about to end. For a moment, just a brief flash, I felt something like regret. This had been the man I loved once, the man I'd chosen to build a life with. And I was about to destroy him, but then I remembered everything. The lies, the betrayal, the years of deception. And my resolve hardened. "Thank you," I said coolly. "We should go." You don't want to be late. The ballroom was already full when we arrived. 200 people in evening wear, drinking champagne and networking. I recognized many of the faces: Marcus's colleagues, major clients, the senior partners who ran the firm. Everyone who mattered in his professional world was here. Perfect. I single quotes D spent the afternoon making my final preparations. The website was ready to launch. I'd sent the dossiers via courier to key people, the senior partners at Henderson and Associates, the regulatory board that oversaw financial advisors in our state, and select journalists who covered business news. They were all timed to arrive first thing tomorrow morning. But I'd included a note that they should check the website tonight. I'd also sent personal letters to Marcus's parents, his sister, and our close friends. Not the full dossier. I wasn't cruel enough to put them through every detail, but enough information that they'd understand what was happening and why everything was set. I just had to wait for the right moment. Marcus was in his element, working the room with charm and confidence. I watched him shake hands, tell jokes, introduce me to clients as his beautiful wife, while his hand rested on my lower back in a gesture of possession and affection that now made my skin crawl. "You seem tense," he whispered to me at one point. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said, giving him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Just tired." The dinner portion of the evening began. We were seated at a prominent table near the front, surrounded by other top performers and their spouses. Marcus was holding court, telling an animated story about a difficult client negotiation that had everyone laughing. I barely touched my food, watching the clock. I'd scheduled the website to go live at 9 p.m. It was 8:40-5. At 9:03, I saw the first sign that things were starting. One of the senior partners, Gerald Henderson, checked his phone and his expression changed. He stood abruptly and left the ballroom. Then another partner's phone buzzed. And another. Marcus's phone began vibrating in his pocket. He pulled it out, frowning at the screen. Multiple messages, multiple calls, all coming in at once. "What the hell?" He muttered. He opened one of the messages and the color drained from his face. The message contained a link to the website I created. The homepage was simple, a photo of Marcus and me on our wedding day, smiling and in love, with a single line of text below it: "The truth about Marcus Chen, a timeline of lies, betrayal and deception." Below that were tabs leading to different sections. The affairs, the financial misconduct, the evidence, all of it laid out in meticulous detail with photos, documents, and testimony. I'd included Vanessa's statement prominently. Her words describing how Marcus had convinced her they had a future together while maintaining his marriage. I'd posted the timeline of his financial irregularities, with copies of client files showing how he'd prioritized his commissions over their interests, but the most damning section was titled, in his own words, "Audio clips of Marcus lying to me, to Vanessa, to colleagues." His voice smooth and convincing as he spun elaborate fictions about where he was and what he was doing. Marcus stared at his phone, his hands trembling. Around us, other guests were pulling out their phones too, the website spreading through the room like wildfire. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely audible. "Sarah, what is this?" I looked at him calmly, this man I'd lived with for 8 years and felt absolutely nothing. "The truth," I said simply. "Something you've never been particularly familiar with." He tried to grab my wrist, but I pulled away. People were staring now, sensing a scene developing. "We need to talk," he hissed. "Privately, now." "I don't think so. I'm done with private conversations where you control the narrative. Everything I need to say is on that website. Everyone you've lied to, cheated, and manipulated, they all deserve to know who you really are." Gerald Henderson had returned to the ballroom and was strutting toward our table, his face thunderous. Behind him, I could see other partners and board members in urgent conversation, their phones out, their expressions ranging from shock to anger. "Chun," Gerald said, his voice tight. "My office, now." Marcus stood, looking around wildly like a trapped animal seeking escape. He tried one more time to appeal to me. "Please," he said, and for the first time I heard real fear in his voice. "Sarah, please. We can fix this. Whatever you think happened, I don't think anything happened, Marcus. I've known for 3 years, and I have proof of everything. Every lie, every affair, every unethical business decision. It's all documented. The nearby tables had gone quiet, people openly watching our confrontation now. 3 years? Marcus repeated, the implications sinking in. You've known for 3 years and you didn't say anything? I was gathering evidence, making sure that when the truth came out, you couldn't spin it or explain it away. You've been living a lie for so long, I thought it only fair that everyone got to see reality for once. Gerald grabbed Marcus's arm. Now, Chun, before this gets worse. As Marcus was led away, looking back at me with an expression of betrayed disbelief that would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. I felt the weight I'd been carrying for 3 years finally lift. I picked up my clutch, straightened my dress, and walked out of the ballroom with my head held high. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of conversation erupting. People pulling up the website, sharing links. Watching Marcus's carefully constructed world crumble in real time. I got in my car and drove to the hotel, where I'd booked a room under my maiden name. I'd packed bags earlier and moved my essential belongings there over the past week. I wasn't going back to that house, to that life dot in my hotel room. I opened my laptop and watched the website's traffic analytics. Thousands of views in the first hour. The story was being shared on social media, picked up by local news outlets. By morning, it would be everywhere. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, Marcus calling over and over. Then his family, then friends. I turned it off. Patricia would handle all communications going forward. I'd given her power of attorney to act on my behalf. I opened a bottle of wine I brought with me and poured a glass. Then I pulled up the photos on my phone, not the evidence I gathered, but the old ones. Pictures of Marcus and me when we first met, when things were good. Or when I thought they were good. I let myself cry then for the first time in 3 years. Not for Marcus or for what we'd had, but for the Sarah I'd been before all this started. The one who'd been naive enough to trust completely, to believe in happily ever after. That Sarah was gone. In her place was someone harder, more cynical, but also stronger than she'd ever imagined she could be. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and personal reckoning. The divorce was finalized quickly. Patricia was as good as her word with all the evidence I gathered, and Marcus's inability to defend himself against the mountain of proof. He had no choice but to agree to my terms. I got the house, my share of all our assets, and compensation for the money he'd stolen from our joint accounts. More satisfying than the financial settlement was watching his professional life implode. Henderson and Associates placed Marcus on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. The regulatory board opened a formal inquiry into his business practices. Several of his clients filed complaints, and at least 2 threatened lawsuits. The firm eventually let him go, issuing a statement about their commitment to ethical practices and apologizing to affected clients. Marcus's license to practice financial advising was suspended, then ultimately revoked after the investigation concluded. He tried to reach me countless times in those first weeks. Calls, texts, emails, even showing up at my office until building security escorted him out. His messages oscillated between apologies, anger, and desperate pleas for another chance. I never responded. There was nothing left to say. His family was devastated. His mother called me once, crying, asking how I could do this to her son. I listened to her pain with surprising detachment, then simply said, "Ask your son what he did to me for 8 years. Goodbye." I never heard from her again. Some of our mutual friends took his side, or at least tried to remain neutral, suggesting that I'd been cruel in how I'd exposed him. But most understood, especially once they read the full scope of his deceptions. Jennifer, my best friend who I'd kept in the dark for so long, was hurt that I hadn't confided in her, but ultimately supportive. "I can't believe you carried this alone for 3 years," she said when we finally talked about everything. "I wish you told me." "I couldn't risk it," I said. "I needed everything to be perfect. Was it worth it? The waiting, the planning, all of it?" I thought about that question a lot. Was elaborate revenge better than just walking away? Would I have been happier if I confronted Marcus that first night and ended things cleanly? Maybe, but there was something undeniably satisfying about watching him face consequences, not just from me, but from everyone he'd lied to. He didn't get to control the narrative or paint himself as the victim. He didn't get to quietly move on while I dealt with the pain alone. Everyone knew what he'd done. His professional reputation was destroyed. His personal relationships were in tatters. He'd have to live with the consequences of his actions for the rest of his life, not just bear them privately in a divorce settlement. Yes, I finally told Jennifer. It was worth it. Vanessa and I stayed in touch, unlikely allies bonded by shared experience. She'd taken the whole thing hard, understandably, dealing with her own feelings of betrayal and public humiliation. But she was also angry, and that anger had given her strength. I keep thinking about all the time I wasted, Vanessa said during one of our coffee meetings. 2 years of my life with someone who was lying to me every single day. How do you move past that? I don't know if you ever completely move past it, I admitted. But you move forward. That's all we can do. The media attention was intense but brief. Local news covered the story for about a week, prominent financial advisor's double life exposed by wife's 3-year investigation made for compelling headlines. A few podcasts reached out wanting to interview me. I declined all of them. I'd said what I needed to say on the website. I didn't need to relive it for entertainment. Marcus eventually moved to another state, trying to start over where his reputation hadn't preceded him. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was working in sales, nowhere near the financial industry. His engagement to someone new was announced on social media about a year after our divorce. I felt nothing when I saw it, just a distant hope that he'd learned something. Though I doubted it. For me, I threw myself into my work at the architectural firm. The distraction was welcome, and my designs had a new intensity to them. My boss noticed and promoted me to lead designer on a major commercial project. I was building things, creating something real and permanent, which felt therapeutic. After years of watching my marriage crumble, I started dating again. Slowly and cautiously, Dr. Chen, my therapist, helped me work through my trust issues and the lingering anger that sometimes surfaced at unexpected moments. It wasn't easy learning to be vulnerable again, but I was trying. One evening, about 6 months after the exposure, I was cleaning out the last boxes from the house I'd shared with Marcus. I'd finally sold it and bought a modern loft downtown that was entirely mine. At the bottom of one box, I found our wedding album. I sat on the floor of my empty living room and flipped through the pages. There we were, young and hopeful and genuinely happy, or so I thought. Marcus's smile in these photos looked sincere. My joy was unquestionable. Had he loved me then at the beginning? Or had it always been a performance? I would never know. And I was learning to be okay with that uncertainty. I closed the album and put it in a bag destined for storage. Not thrown away, that felt too much like erasing who I'd been, but not displayed either. Just put away. A chapter of my life that was finished. A year and a half after that fateful night at the partners' meeting, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, working on design mock-ups for a new project, when someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was Rebecca Chen, Marcus's sister. We'd been close once before everything happened. After the exposure, she'd sent me one angry email calling me vindictive and cruel, then cut off all contact. "Sarah," she said hesitantly, "can I sit?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me, curious despite myself. Rebecca looked older than I remembered, tired. She ordered a coffee and sat down, not quite meeting my eyes. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "I said terrible things to you. I blamed you for destroying my brother's life. But I was wrong. I waited, not making this easy for her. Marcus and I had lunch last month," she continued. He's not doing well. He's in therapy now, finally, and he's been dealing with his issues. He told me things I didn't know. About how the cheating started long before you discovered it. About the lying and the manipulation. About how he'd been living a double life for most of your marriage." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "And he told me about the other women before Vanessa. There were others even during our childhood, our teenage years, patterns of behavior I'd ignored or explained away. He admitted he has a problem, that he's always had a problem with honesty and fidelity. He said you catching him and exposing him was the only thing that finally forced him to face it." "I didn't expose him for his benefit," I said quietly. "I did it because he deserved consequences." "I know. But you also did something no one else had ever done. You held him accountable. Really accountable in a way that couldn't be minimized or swept under the rug. Our parents always made excuses for him. His friends looked the other way. You were the first person who said no more and actually followed through." Rebecca reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry. For not believing you. For blaming you. You didn't destroy his life, he did that all by himself. You just made sure everyone knew about it. After she left, I sat with those words for a long time. I never thought about my actions as accountability. Exactly, I'd been focused on revenge, on making Marcus pay for what he'd done. But maybe they were the same thing. Maybe revenge and accountability weren't so different when someone had hurt you so badly and faced no natural consequences for their actions. I thought about all the women who stay silent about betrayal, who handle things privately, who protect their partner's reputation even while divorcing them. There's nothing wrong with that choice. Everyone processes trauma differently. But there's also nothing wrong with my choice to speak up, to expose the truth, to insist that actions have consequences. I'd spent 3 years of my life on this revenge plot. 3 years planning, gathering evidence, living a lie while Marcus lived his. Some people thought that made me petty or obsessive. Maybe they were right, but I also knew this. I'd taken my power back. I'd refused to be a silent victim. I'd made sure that Marcus's actions had real, lasting consequences. Not just for me, but in all areas of his life where he'd built a false reputation. Was it healthy? Probably not entirely. Dr. Chun and I had spent many sessions examining my choices. The toll the prolonged deception had taken on my mental health. Whether I'd become someone I didn't want to be in my pursuit of justice, but would I do it again? Honestly, yes. Because the alternative was walking away quietly while Marcus continued to charm and manipulate everyone around him. Facing no consequences beyond losing a wife, he'd already checked out of the marriage with emotionally. 2 years after the exposure, I found myself in an unexpected place, truly happy. I'd met someone new, Daniel, an architect at a different firm. We'd collaborated on a joint project and discovered we worked well together. He was kind, straightforward, and refreshingly honest about his feelings and intentions. He knew my whole story. I'd been upfront about it from the beginning, not wanting any secrets in this new relationship. That must have taken incredible strength. He'd said when I finished telling him about Marcus and the 3-year investigation, "I can't imagine carrying that alone for so long." I'm not sure it was strength, I'd admitted. Maybe it was just stubbornness. Either way, I'm glad you did what you needed to do. And I'm glad you're here now. We took things slowly but steadily. I was learning to trust again, to believe that not everyone was hiding his secret life. Daniel was patient with my occasional paranoia, understanding when I needed reassurance, never making me feel bad for the baggage I carried. My career was thriving. The lead design role had turned into a partnership offer at the firm. I was designing buildings that would stand for decades, creating spaces where people would live and work and make their own memories. There was something deeply satisfying about building things after spending so long tearing something down. I also started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping women who were leaving difficult situations. Many of them were dealing with infidelity, emotional abuse, or partners who deceived them for years. I understood their pain in a way that felt useful, and I could offer them practical advice about protecting themselves legally and financially. One woman, Maria, reminded me so much of myself. Her husband had been cheating for 6 years. She just found out and was devastated, unsure whether to confront him or how to move forward. What should I do? She asked me during one of our sessions. Only you can answer that, I told her. There's no right or wrong way to handle betrayal. Some people confront immediately and move on quickly. Others need time to process. What I did, the investigation, the public exposure, that was my way. It might not be yours. Do you regret it? She asked. The way you did it? I thought about Marcus, about the website that was still up. I'd never taken it down. About the ripple effects that exposure had on both of our lives. No, I said honestly. I don't regret it. I needed that closure, that sense of control. I needed everyone to know the truth, not just me. But it came at a cost. 3 years of my life spent in deception, stress that affected my health, becoming someone calculating and secretive. You have to decide if that trade-off is worth it for you. Maria eventually chose a different path. She confronted her husband, went to couples therapy, and ultimately decided to rebuild their marriage. I supported her choice, even though it wasn't what I would have done. That was the point. We all handle these situations differently, and none of us should be judged for our choices. I ran into Marcus one last time, completely by accident. I was at a restaurant with Daniel celebrating a successful project completion. When I saw him across the room with his new fiancée, our eyes met, and for a moment time seemed to stop. He looked older, more worn. The confidence and charm that had defined him were muted. He gave me a small nod, nothing more, and I nodded back. There was nothing left to say between us. "That's him?" Daniel asked quietly, having followed my gaze. "That's him." "Do you want to leave?" I looked at Marcus one more time, this man who defined so much of my adult life, who I'd loved and hated and spent 3 years bringing down. And I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no lingering pain. Just a distant sense of closure. "No," I said, turning back to Daniel with a smile. "I'm exactly where I want to be." We finished our dinner, laughing and making plans for the weekend. Across the room, Marcus was just another stranger, someone from my past who had no power over my present or future. Later that night, lying in bed, I thought about how far I'd come. From the woman who'd discovered her husband's betrayal in their bedroom to the woman who'd orchestrated his downfall to the woman who'd rebuilt her life into something better than it had ever been before. The revenge had been satisfying. The exposure had felt like justice. But this peace, this happiness, this life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage, this was the real victory. I'd learned things about myself through this experience. I'd learned I was stronger than I thought, more capable of strategic thinking and long-term planning than I'd ever imagined. I'd learned that I could survive betrayal and come out the other side. I'd learned that sometimes you have to break completely to rebuild into something better. But I'd also learned about the cost of revenge. The toll it takes on your psyche to live a double life. The way anger can consume you if you let it. The fine line between justice and obsession. The relationships that suffered because I couldn't be honest about what I was going through. If I could go back and do things differently, would I? I honestly don't know. Part of me wishes I confronted Marcus immediately, gotten out sooner, and not wasted 3 more years in a dead marriage. But another part knows that without those 3 years of investigation, without the comprehensive exposure, Marcus would have moved on unscathed. He would have found new clients, new women to lie to, and continued his pattern of deception indefinitely. At least this way, everyone knew. At least there were consequences. At least other people were protected from his manipulations because his reputation preceded him now. Was it worth it? For me, yes. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend my path to others. Revenge is complicated, messy, and often costs more than you expect. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, moving on, and refusing to let your betrayer have any more of your time or energy. But sometimes you need to see justice done in a tangible way. You need to see consequences. You need the world to know what happened to you, and you need the person who hurt you to face what they've done. There's no right answer. There's only your answer, the one that lets you sleep at night and move forward with your life. 5 years after the night at the Grand Regency Hotel, I married Daniel in a small ceremony surrounded by friends and family. It was nothing like my first wedding, no elaborate production, no hundreds of guests. Just the people who mattered most, celebrating a relationship built on honesty, trust, and genuine partnership. Jennifer was my maid of honor again, and she cried through the entire ceremony. Afterward, she pulled me aside. "I'm so glad you found this," she said, gesturing to the intimate celebration around us. "You deserve to be happy. You deserve someone who treats you with respect." "I know," I said. And I did know. I'd learned my worth through fire and pain, but I'd learned it thoroughly. My career had continued to flourish. I'd become a partner at the firm and had won several prestigious design awards. I was known in my field not as Marcus Chun's ex-wife, but as Sarah Mitchell, accomplished architect. I'd reclaimed my identity completely. Daniel and I had bought a house. Together, a beautiful mid-century modern that we'd renovated ourselves. Every corner of it was filled with honesty and shared decisions. No secrets, no separate bank accounts, no locked phones or mysterious absences. Just partnership, the way it should have been all along. I heard occasionally about Marcus through the grapevine. His second engagement had fallen apart. He'd moved back to the area and was working in a completely different field, far from finance. He had apparently completed extensive therapy and was, by all accounts, trying to become a better person. I hoped that was true. Not for his sake particularly, but for the sake of anyone else who might become involved with him. People can change, though it usually takes hitting rock bottom to motivate that change. The website I created 5 years ago was still up. I kept it active as a reminder, both to myself and to anyone who might search Marcus's name. The traffic had died down to almost nothing. But occasionally I'd get an email from someone who'd found it. Usually a woman who'd just discovered her partner's infidelity and wanted to know how I'd managed to stay strong through the investigation. I always wrote back with the same message. Do what feels right for you. There's no wrong way to handle betrayal. But whatever you decide, document everything, protect yourself financially, and remember that you deserve better. Sometimes they thanked me. Sometimes I never heard from them again. That was okay. I'd put my story out into the world, and it had taken on a life of its own. If it helped even one person feel less alone in their pain, then all the difficulty had been worthwhile. One afternoon, I was going through old files on my laptop, doing digital spring cleaning, when I came across the hidden folder I created 5 years ago. The one filled with all my evidence, photos, documents, recordings, bank statements. Everything I gathered during those 3 years of secret investigation. I sat looking at that folder for a long time, my cursor hovering over the delete button. This was the last piece of that chapter, the final remnant of who I'd been during that dark period. With a deep breath, I moved the folder to the trash and emptied it permanently. I didn't need it anymore. The evidence had served its purpose. Marcus had faced his consequences. I moved on to a life that was authentically mine. Holding onto those files would have been like keeping a door open to the past when I'd already walked through a better door to the future. That evening, Daniel and I sat on our back patio watching the sunset and talking about plans to expand the garden. Simple, domestic, peaceful. This was the life I'd built from the ruins of my first marriage, not perfect but honest. Not without challenges, but built on a foundation of trust. You're quiet, Daniel observed, reaching over to take my hand. Everything okay? Everything's good, I said, squeezing his hand back. Just thinking about how far I've come. We've come, he corrected gently. We're building this together. We are, I agreed, smiling at him. And I'm grateful for that every single day. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a sense of completion I'd been chasing for years. The story of my revenge was over. The chapter of my pain had closed. This was the beginning of something new, not defined by what had been done to me, but by what I was choosing to build. Not about tearing down, but creating. Not about revenge, but about renewal. I'd stayed silent for 3 years, gathering my evidence and planning my revenge. Then I'd exposed everything in one dramatic night that changed multiple lives forever. It had been messy and complicated and probably not entirely healthy, but it had been my choice. My way of taking control when everything else had been taken from me. And now, 5 years later, I could finally say with certainty, I'd won. Not because Marcus had lost everything, though he had. Not because the world knew what he'd done, though they did. But because I'd emerged from the wreckage of my first marriage and built something beautiful from the ashes. I'd learned to trust again, to love again, to believe in partnership again. I'd built a career I was proud of and relationships that mattered. I'd helped other women navigate their own betrayals. I'd become someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient than I'd ever been before. The revenge had been the catalyst, but this life, this peace, this happiness, this was the real ending to my story, and it was an ending I could live with.